And we're live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Between Two Keepstars, the seventh best Eve talk show currently in circulation. With me today, I have a amazing return guest, Elise Randolph. Elise, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, how's it going? I'm Elise Randolph. I don't know, depends how you know me, depends on, or if you know me, depends on when you started playing. A long time ago, I was an FC and I used to lead the Pandemic Legion. Now I'm just kind of like a lowly CEO in PL. And I just kind of run around and do dumb shit in EVE Online. I have a lot of fun. I try and spread out where I am, but I also am really enjoying trash talking in the T5Z. So that's been my bread and butter for the last few weeks.
All right, awesome. And first, I would love to thank Goonswarm for kindly donating their gate camp as the background for this show because I figured, you know what, why not spice it up a little bit? So, a lot of things have happened since you and I last chat, mainly being that some of your predictions came true and some of my predictions came true, and I figured we should talk about that because what's better than retrospective? Besides, I'm going to just end that right there.
Yeah, as long as I can just cherry pick the things that I was right about, I'm all good. Just kidding. Just kidding.
That's fine with me. So the first of which, I guess, did you foresee this war going this way? At first, it started to seem like, okay, goons are really putting up a fight, and we're skirmishing. Okay, then Quirius fell, and then the whole thing with the Keepstars happened. Keepstar was stolen. Brave Titan was destroyed. I think it was PL who lost a Revenant,
Yeah,
and
we lost a Revenant in
yeah,
staging. It's a feels weird, man, but yeah.
I guess shit happens. But it we killed those or the dreads that got on them. So you take the small victories.
Yeah, it was like this weird Secret Santa thing, right? We fed a Revenant and then we stole a Keepstar, so it kind of sort of evens out a little bit. I don't know. Just a whole bunch of weird shit's been going on. But to answer your question, I'm not. I mean, I kind of figured that this would be how it would be playing out, right? It's a real slow burn, a slow grind. Wait for solve 3 to hit in Keepstar systems, then go after those Keepstars. What was really anomalous to me was when Goons just went full in, all out to try and kill the Keepstars anchoring in Delve. Like it was bound to happen, right? Like I didn't expect them to throw 1,000 ravens literally at one single fight, and then like another trillionist at another fight. Like they just showed that they had so much shit that they could throw at these things if they wanted to, and they just went like over and over and over again to keep the thing out until the bubble wrapped one came in. So that was the surprising part for me. The rest of the pace of the war, it seemed to be about what I think everyone expected, or at least what I expected. Slow, that could heat up at any moment. I remember I was like really smug because I made a great prediction that when the PAPI guys moved into T5Z, when we moved in like next door to Imperium staging, I was like, man, this you got to keep expectations right because people could just hubris feed. Man, I can't speak. Hubris feed really hard. And that's kind of what happened, right? Like the Revenant and the Levy, like they went after the goons dropped on, rather the Imperium dropped on a Levy, rather a Revenant. And then a Levy was just like, yo, I'm invincible. Let me undock and just DD free. And then they're just like, okay, free Levy kill. So there's like a lot of there's a lot of fight still left in the Imperium. Just they're being a little cagey about it sometimes. Yeah, one of the funnier stories about that whole Revenant drop is Peanut Smash, who didn't FC the whole thing at all, but he was just there in an apostle. Um, he's probably killed more Revenants than anyone else in the game. And he actually also killed Jay Amazingness's Revenant, and that was Jay's op to kill this one. So, I mean, I'm sure if there was a question of, hey, do we have the resources to do it? What's the best way to do it? Peanut is always like a good person to say, hey, yeah, just drop these 37 dreads or whatever, and it has zero chance of getting wrapped. They like ship scanned it. to see exactly how it was fit. So they knew exactly how much DPS it took to kill it. Though I will say, I don't know if you guys caught the name of the dictator that got the initial tackle. It was obviously it was AWACS, right? There was a spy, a horde spy, I use that term very loosely, named Third Imposter, who had just joined Horde like 2 weeks or a few months beforehand, but had just injected to fly the voter. So this guy called Third Imposter just sitting on the Horde Keepstar. This Revenant aggroes, and he just locks him and income the goons, right? So they didn't even have to worry about tackle or anything. That's one of the downsides to open, like, to still recruit, because that sort of thing does happen. But man, just mad respect for the name. I was laughing, like my sides were figuratively splitting and tears were literally running down my face when I saw Third Imposter is the one that was AWOXing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's we were playing Among Us with a group. Even some people from like PL and Israel were playing together, and a Third Imposter is just someone. For those that hasn't haven't played, the game is like two aliens versus 8 humans, and the humans have to work together to figure out who the aliens are, or rather the imposters are. And Third Imposter is just a human that makes really bad decisions and helps out the imposters. So yeah, it's just a hilarious and perfect name, like incredibly apropos for the situation. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think once you get that first one in, once that first Keepstar goes down, it's pretty clear that there's going to be more, right? It costs so much in terms of just raw ISK and resources for goons to keep those citadels down, to keep the Keepstars out. And once that first one's in, like you can't close that box. So it makes sense from a strategic perspective to just let it pop up and let it happen, right? So the reason it's kind of significant is where it's located, right? So the Imperium had always planned to have like two bases, right? So they've got 1DQ, which is their main staging, and then they have a backup staging and like a capital staging, where they had relocated some things to an E30. And as you can see, everything behind E30, there's like prime ratting pockets and stuff like that. None of that area has been touched because it's really hard to get through by taking conventional gates. You can bridge in, but then you'd have to either like bridge out or get a foothold in there somehow. So Imperium, like from a military strategy perspective, there's like, yo, we want to keep everything behind the E30 pocket clear. That's good. So PAPI just like flaunts into Delph, says, okay, so we're gonna place a Keepstar and stage in it in T5Z, which is A, right next door to your subcat main staging, and B, also splits you up uh, between your two stagings, right? Like you have to either bridge there, which it's kind of easy to do, but it's still a little bit of effort, and you have to bridge back. And the more crucial part is it also cuts off Fountain as like anything that they can go through, right? Because if the Imperium wants to get to Fountain, they'd have to go through T5Z, or they'd have to bridge through and then gate back through, or they'd have to put like significant assets on the other side to bridge from and stuff. So that's at least where Horde put like a huge level of important on is retaking Fountain from the initiative. And my theory for that is because I'm not involved in any of the decision making. Maybe like a long time ago I would have been, but not anymore because I'm just an old man with a cane. But like my view of like retaking Fountain, right? It's just like you need you need to achieve something to keep momentum up in the war. And around the holidays and stuff like that, like people, especially the Eve player base, they're young families. A lot of them are, or just young people, young professionals that are going to go home, so they can't necessarily like devote nerd hardcore time to grinding down like Keepstars and Delve. So the decision is like, hey, you know, it's kind of easy to do and also like kind of important as well. Let's just retake Fountain. So they just saunter up in there, take Fountain. It's low effort, high impact, fun thing to do until the holidays are over, and then the work can heat up a little bit more. And that's not to say that nothing's going to happen between now and New Year's. Obviously, we can see that it's just like a huge powder keg. Anything can set it off, right? The Imperium is also playing this waiting game too, waiting for numbers to drop on the PAPI side so they can strike and have like a little bit more of an even playing field. So like they're really forcing the PAPI side to do everything by the book and like as prepared as you can be. So you can't like half-ass something. Where in Fountain, you can definitely half-ass because by the time the Imperium forms, like you know about it and you can get safe.
Well, I mean, and definitely like what we've seen from Pappy is like at the beginning of the war, it really there didn't really seem to be like a cohesive plan. It was sort of just, okay, burn this down, go and kill this. Whereas now it's more of, okay, we know exactly what we're doing, we know why we're doing it. We need to hold these systems, take these systems for the 35 days, get a Sino jammer online, and go and siege the Keepstars. So it's very well organized. What do you? So a lot of people have been speculating about like when are we going to get that big super capital fight? Judging from the fact of that PAPI is doing this whole strategy of we're going to get our own jammers online and siege the Keepstars under protection of our own Sino jammers, do you think that that sort of diminishes the ability of us having that one big super capital fight?
I don't know. It's tricky. So for the big fights, almost all the time that the biggest super fights in Eve happen, I'm talking like Asakai, BTAC R, like MTAC O, even to an extent UALX. All of it happened because one side kind of screwed up or made a mistake or something, and people just like snowballed after that. Someone made that snap decision, like, yeah, screw it, let's go. We don't know exactly how this is going to work out, and we don't know what the other side can do exactly, but hashtag YOLO, let's do it. And we saw the Imperium like kind of try that with their crazy boson maneuver, where they just did something that no one else had really even tried on that scale. And I know I know a lot of the FCs from the PAPI side like to give them shit, like, hey, of course you knew this wasn't going to work. It doesn't even work on carriers. How do you expect it to work on supers? And I kind of ribbed them a little bit hard. But I mean, I thought that was a genius play to try and boson and kill 200 supers. And if it worked, it would be legendary, not only in Eve, but in like gaming to begin with. It'd be like just super cool feat.
Yeah, it definitely would have been cool. It would have given the Matani a lot of herf to blurf about, but it would have been cool.
Yeah. I mean, we just I don't think we'd be hearing the end of it, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think they might try something similar again. The hard thing is like I don't think we're gonna get the opportunity to just have this huge slugfest, if only because the Imperium, if it wasn't clear to them before, it's clear to them now that they are grossly outnumbered in terms of supers and caps and titans. Um, like just the amount of weaponry that Pappy can put on the field and replace is absolutely just insane. Like there's a Sodio that's put up in T5 that's just pumping out capitals left and right for the Pappy side. It's nuts. And all that happened because there's like one or two like little dread fights that would happen. They're like, all right, let's gear up here. But I don't know. It's hard to say because the Imperium, their strategy is definitely like very much a waiting game, as I was saying before. They want Pappy. Like their view of Pappy is that they're these loosely held together allies that can eventually turn on one another or at least flake out. So their goal in everything that they do, every little bit of messaging, every bit of even to some extent target calling, goes down to try and divide these groups up, right? So you see, you go on Reddit, and everyone's talking about, oh shoot, these test guys, they're nowhere to be found. Horde is carrying them. Horde, why are you test pets now? Like they're trying anything they can to break the group that is PAPI apart so they can get an even number advantage, or at least closer to an even number advantage. So in terms of cap fights, if they take a cap fight, they're going to be at a disadvantage unless they've achieved this. So, and at the same time, I think PAPI are like really happy with how things are going. Like, I'm sure there are some people in some groups that are just like, I hate working with this guy. Like, I'm sure Frat, when they see like a test ping, they're just like, screw these guys. But it's not to the extent where they're ever going to leave, because they know what's at stake for them, right? That they want to keep hitting the goons and the Imperium in general. And really, like, it's kind of nifty for everyone involved, because no one's really losing anything in doing this attack, right? You see, like, if you pull up the drone numbers and the MER, you can see in the north and the northeast specifically, just the amount of money that's being generated is insane. So they're happy to keep this going on for as long as it takes. Legacy, I don't think they're feeling the hurt at all either. They're having a good time. They get to be center stage for beating the goons down. So I don't know. I just don't see it really breaking unless something major happens.
Well, and Legacy just recently announced the fact that they were moving to Delve, which seems to me to be more of a, not really a quote-unquote move, but more of a continued oppression of goons. Because the biggest thing, especially with the last World War B, where the biggest problem was, we went and we beat goons, but we didn't actually finish them. We didn't actually go and get the job done, essentially. So
Yeah,
do you think...
people were kind of burned out of that one, and they also just didn't care. But yeah, taking the notion that Legacy would move to Delve, or at least that test would move to Delve, is nifty, right? Because you have to have someone strong living in the region so it doesn't get taken back. Now, like, this is jumping a lot of steps ahead, right? And as much as people think that the outcome to this war is like foretold, or it's going to happen, I don't really know. I don't want to like jump the gun and say, oh yeah, the Imperium's definitely going to lose and be homeless sometime. But there's just so much space that they could go to and take if they wanted to, right? You're talking, there's NPC regions in the north they could go to. There's NPC region, like they could go to Wicked Creek or something lame like that. They could go to Losec, that's right next to some areas. They could go to like Syndicate or Outer Ring. Like, there's just so many options for them to go to. But obviously, you want to make them make that move, right? You don't want to just be like, okay, well, Delve is free for the taking. We killed all your Keepstars. They don't want, like, the PAPI doesn't want like another fountain situation at the end of this. They don't want someone to just reclaim it as soon as the eye of Papdor is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's where, I don't want to say the shame, because that's not what it's for, but that's where like you feel like you're defeated, is when you have to leave your homeland. So if Legacy do move into Delve, it's smart, because you need someone to stay there, whoever it is. Someone's got to be there so goons can't just come in right afterwards and retake it, because then all this is for nothing and you're instantly going to die.
Right, and I totally agree. I definitely think that this whole like PAPI moving in is meant to be for sort of long-term oppression. The one thing that I'm kind of curious about is that goons waiting and seeing for us to, finally, get up and leave, and for our numbers to come down. I'm kind of curious as to, okay, well, what if we actually kill all your Keepstars first? Because if they no longer have Keepstars and they need to asset safe to their Titans, that's gonna be huge.
Yeah, the thing about it is, though, there's just so many Keepstars that are still up. Like, 1DQ has more citadels than most regions in the game.
Right.
So I think they're they're pretty confident that, hey, in the next 3 months, there's still going to be a Keepstar somewhere in Delve, unless this thing like really spirals out of control for them, which it really only happens if you take big risks and fail. Which is why when you asked earlier if I saw like a huge cat fight on the horizon, probably not, because that's like one of the paths to certain defeat for the Imperium is to take a big swing and miss. Because like then you just give your enemy so much motivation to come and get you some more. The one interesting thing is that's been going on, right? So you talked about the strategy, which we should probably go into a little bit, right? So what the strategy is for systems that have keep stars, PAPI go in, take the iHub, try to control it until solve 3, and then go in, put up a jammer so they can control when the jammer is online. Um, and then go in and siege that keep star. You saw that happen today, right? The first system uh tricked over from I think the from solve 2 to solve 3. Where was that? HIX? Is that where it
I
was today? I
believe it
think.
was. Actually, we've got Dotland. Get Dotland. Go to
Yeah. So if you go to
Delve.
Hicks, if you go to the solves changes, it's in period basis. So
Oh,
goons are gonna say it's not delve, so it doesn't count. But you see on the 5th of this from solve 2 to solve 3. Yeah, that's not an inconsequential amount of time to get it there. So that's when the siege starts. But you can see like the state of the war right now is fighting over these iHub timers. The first objective was for PABI to just remove the infrastructure from Delve, so people can't the goons can't take jump bridges, they can't sign around. It feels less homey.
right,
So that was already accomplished, right? The next goal is to hold these things until soft 3, so you could put in your own jammer and start sieging stuff in absolute peace, right? Because there's no way to make a mistake if if you've got a Sino jammer on your side that you can cycle on and off whenever you want, because then you get to dictate when and exactly how the fight happens.
right.
But the Imperium have been pretty good at resetting those timers, right? So they've been pretty feisty, very skirmishy. They don't show up to like these big, like Faction Fortizar timers all the time, or even Sodio timers. But for iHub stuff, they've proven to be quite annoying. They've reset a few, um, which is a testament to just how tenacious they are to keep these things going. And to them, this whole thing is a time game. So the more that they can reset here, that the better it feels for them.
Well, if we go and, I mean, just looking at the Delve iHub, like, you see, you can, like, a lot of these systems that were for test are constantly flipping back and forth. Like TAC XR has no iHub in it right now. You have QX, which I'm pretty sure QX was PAPI at some point, but now it's back to Condi. 4K TAC is IOU and constantly flipping. Like, all these systems are just constantly flipping. And when after watching a little bit of what was it, the meta show, they actually have, which I personally think this is cool. They have an app that is pretty much their doom clock, which tells them, okay, these are the different iHubs we need to hit to reset the timer. And it almost feels like Goon's whole strategy is we want to stop them before they get to those big set piece battles.
Yeah, that's definitely it. Their doomsday clock is pretty great for memes and stuff. It's and also good for like motivation, right? So it kind of gives that sense of urgency, and you can kind of, especially since they're somewhat successful at it, in terms of just what they're able to do and reset. It gives their members like, hey, we're doing something. Like there's some sense of agency there instead of just we're waiting and losing everything in this region. So it's a good way to keep their members motivated. Both sides have been doing insanely good work at motivating their members. I think we pulled, I said this before, but it still holds true now. If you pull any random person from the Imperium, it could be Bastion, it could be Lawn, it could be anywhere, even Goons, pull them out and say, hey, are you winning this war? They will say, without a doubt, unequivocally, yes, we're winning. You do the same for PAPI. Pull anyone out of any group there, pull on and say, "Are you guys winning?" And they'll say just the same thing. Yeah, of course, we're easy winning. So it's just so cool to see that dynamic because it's almost never that way, right? When one side is like so clearly dominating territory, talking about like period basis, Quirius, Fountain, all of that has fallen, and Keepstars have like been trashed, and there's like nowhere safe to rat and delve. Like if this was anyone else, and you ask them, "Are you winning?" They'd be like, "No, we're coming up with a fail cascade plan as we speak." But no, the Imperium feels they feel fine. They feel strong as ever. There might be moments where they're worried. There might be like things that give them trepidation, but they still feel like there's a chance that they win, and they're not planning a way out at all. Like all their things are not necessarily reactive or defensive. Some of them are reactive too. Like the initiative deployed the curse this week, which is huge for them. Mostly because I think the initiative like weren't really being used properly as a fighting force. But now like Legacy's backdoor gets to get kicked in all the time. So these legacy guys are gonna have to feel the pain of moving back and back and forth to deal with timers.
That's actually kind of an interesting point. Because previously in the war, Init, Bastion, and a lot of those other groups, like they've really fought hard in staying to try and go and hit Esoteria. And a few weeks ago, their HT4K citadel was destroyed. Before that, Init was up in Fountain messing around there, and then it was back in around the catch region going and hitting Evictus. So it kind of feels like with what Init's trying to do is they're trying to sort of poke and prod at Legacy to find, okay, where are the different spots that we can poke and prod, and every time they poke and fail, they seem to get up and move to another spot because it is. I feel like has deployed so many different places during this war and hasn't really seen much success. Like if we look at Esoteria and a lot of basically the stuff that's happened there, honestly, it doesn't look like they've really lost a lot. Whereas you had a lot of herf blurf about, oh, you know, we're gonna take the fight to them, us and our angry Russian allies in the Bastion. But looking at the Sav, they've managed to take the northern part of Esoteria, which Test never really cared about.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? They actually had some pretty good success in Esoteria with what Bastion and all those little groups and SIGs were doing. I'd say they had some pretty good success, but you're right. Like Test just didn't care. They're just like, okay, that's cool. What are you gonna do about it? And then the initiative has to sit there and be like, oh shit, you're right. And like, what are we doing about it? But I think it's actually in like one of the coolest spots you can be in this war. Right. So you start in Fountain. You get rolled in Fountain if you're initiative. You just get absolutely just utterly completely rolled. You spend like a week kind of herf blurfing that you're like the 300 Spartan warriors. Then you take this one real bad fight, lose like 60 carriers, and then all of a sudden in 2 weeks the entire region is gone to you. So you move back to Delve. Then, like, mind you, you are arguably one of the best or the best medium scale PvP group in the game, with the best, arguably, or at least the top, like FCs in the game, right? You've got Pando, you've got Shines, you've got like these all stars at every position. And instead, you're throwing them in Stratops where they're just a Raven, just a nameless Raven pushing F1, dying, reshipping, and doing it all over again. Like that's just a tragic waste of talent. And they were just really just, I don't know. I always felt that it was a complete waste to use them in that way. Like you don't need, like the Imperium's huge. You don't need the initiative to be an N+1 guy. Like you could just get someone who doesn't PvP or doesn't like really care to PvP. They're motivated to fight anyways. Throw them in a free Raven, tell them to push F1 at a Keepstar, and go away. So now you see the initiative used a little bit better, or at least utilized a little bit more to what they're suited for, because no one else in the Imperium can do this, right? Like you can't send a lawn over to curse and have them expect them to have any success. But the initiative you can, because this is what they're built for. And not only that, but it gives their members like a little bit more motivation, right? If you look at the kill boards, you can see this like drop off of initiative pilots, like that they didn't want to be in these 1,000-man battles where they're just getting outblobbed 3-1. They want to do like more fun stuff that's not like super tie-dye. That's why they joined the initiative to begin with. So now they get to utilize their skill set a little bit more, and get to poke and prod, and that's always fun. Like shooting at the soft underbelly always feels like a really fun position. And one of the the more interesting aspects of it, and I'm kind of ranting now, but the initiative can pretty much do whatever they want if they wanted to, right? They're in this really cool position where they don't have a home, like Fountain's gone. Delve isn't their home. They've got some stuff there, but they could just say, "Yo, goons, Asher, I'm going to Declan for a little bit." And what are they gonna do? What is Asher gonna say? Like, no, you can't go. They need the initiative. They need all the members that they can get. They need the numbers. They need the FCs. They need that know-how. So they would have to just be in the position to be like, yeah, you can go. We'll see you when you get back. Obviously, like the initiative are not taking advantage of the fact that they've got that they're holding all the cards. But I still think is a really funny dynamic that you have initiative that could pretty much do anything they want if they wanted to. And credit to them and Bliss and their leadership. They're doing stuff that's actually helpful to their side, instead of just the easy fun stuff.
Do you think that it? Do you think that initiative is going to be able to affect the war in any, I guess, big way with this whole offensive?
I think they're gonna feel like they're effective, even if they aren't. Right? Like, so you're talking about they're gonna be in Curse, which is like a spiritual homeland for them in a way. It's like where they've always done deployments to, and so they like the reason, specifically GTACO and Curse. It's like their home away from home, and it was even before they had Fountain. So it has like nomadic roots to them as well. So they feel good about being in Curse to begin with. But you go in there and let's just say you take head GP, um, or you take some other systems, right? And you just destroy the infrastructure there, or you make people bounce back and forth, and that gives you like a timer win in Delve. Even though on the grand scale of things, they're not going to single-handedly push it in any one way or another, they can always find like a win somewhere that they can classify as a win. And taking head GP, it would be huge if they did, and I'm sure they're going for it already, because then logistics for legacy pods becomes a little bit harder.
Well, and actually looking at the map, it seems that 1P-TAC, the system right next to Jamunda, has already been reinforced. It looks like the TCU has been reinforced along with like a few other systems in the region. Granted, I have no idea if it was the initiative who did that, but there's definitely reinforced systems.
Yeah.
The one thing that I found interesting was that they talked about going after Brave, but I don't really think that attacking Catch is the best way to go after Brave. Unless that was just them. Unless that was just people talking. Because if they want to go after Brave, like I would think that they would go or try to hit somewhere near Impasse, but at the same time, Impasse is a little bit difficult to actually get to.
Yeah, the nice thing about Catch is that you can just live in Curse and base out of Curse, and you're completely undisruptible. Like no one can do anything to you. And the more, I guess, some of the most utilized systems, if you look up the what's it called, the dynamic bounty system and stuff like that. If you look in that in game, some of the more used systems are that little pocket right next to GE-TAC. So it's the pocket that's in Catch that's kind of next to Impasse, and it's not that far away from Curse, right? You can go to oh shit, jump the gate to U-Q, and then you're like in bridge range right there. And then that's the most utilized little pocket in all of Legacy space, or in all of Brave space specifically. So if you can disrupt that, or at least force a reaction, then let's just say the 200-man Brave fleet that shows up to a timer, what if they turn down to 150 or 125? And then you just keep doing this over and over to like the different allies. And eventually that 3-1 or 2-1 number advantage that the PAPI have, it gets closer to like 1.5 to 1. And then maybe you can start taking fights a little bit better. So that's the whole that's the thought process behind the move. But also as an initiative pilot, you're going to have way more fun. Frankly, you're going to have way more fun attacking something than defending it. I always had more the most fun in Eve being an attacker rather than a defender. The iHub and Sov dynamics change that a little bit, because when you're fighting for iHubs, it doesn't really matter if you're an attacker or defender, it feels like, in terms of action. But in terms of like just having a physical, tangible effect on a battle, it always feels more fun to be an attacker. And that, like, you have to manage what your members want to do as well, right? So you can't just be like nameless guy in Goon Fleet as an initiative pilot. Like, you want to be the guy out there causing trouble. Like, that's what I said. Like, that's why they joined this group to begin with.
All right. Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you just said. What was I going to say? Do you think that initiative after Poking and Prodding Brave might try to go up after maybe PanFam? Seeing as from in their perspective, PanFam seems to be doing quote unquote the most carrying according to them.
Yeah, that's why I was giga surprised when this whole thing kicked off that they were like defending Fountain real hard. I thought the winning move, and this is just me being like an old person in Eve, because this is what I would have done. I would have instantly just deployed north, right? And just started hitting stuff in the north. Like Darkside did small deployments in the north, but they were just doing it for fun, right? If you threw all of the initiative up there and had them do like a jump clone deployment where if there's a huge fight, they would jump clone back to Delve. They could just have like this massive effect. And even if like nothing happens from it, the fact that you get to herf blurf about it, like imagine you're fighting in C3N and you're the Imperium and you lose one of the forts are save another, but then in the north, the initiative has killed like 3 Satios at the same time. So as you know, PAPI are saying, "Oh, Iskor is one, blah blah blah. We're killing your structures." You get to turn around and be like, "Lol, we have so many of these structures, and you're like bleeding Sodios for it. Hope it's worth it. Is test worth it?" And they could just like hammer that narrative back and forth, because like Brave going from Delve to catch, or PAPI going from Delve to catch to try and save these structures, it's kind of easy peasy. PanFam going from Delve all the way in the north again to save these things, that gets harder. That's where you get like more fatigue, especially from people jump cloning. Maybe they forget to set a clone. Maybe they screw up. Maybe they're getting sick and tired of all this. And then all of a sudden you start seeing like just members drop off and off and off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would have done if I were them, right? Like, and that's what PL has done in the past in these big wars too. So that's why I was really surprised that they didn't do that. I think you're right that that's probably in store for them if they don't get any success from Brave. Like that's the next, or rather, that's one of the last options they have.
Right. Well, and something I found interesting is just listening to Brave FC's, like they've been having a really fun time fighting initiative. Like I think one of the FCs that was on Trash Talk Tuesday, I think his name is Jeremy, always talked about how it was so much fun fighting in it and how much fun the Brave guys are having. So I think that this having initiative go and attacking Brave, I think is good for Brave, because it's sort of putting them to the grindstone to make them essentially get better, which, I mean, Horde has found a ton of success, which is, from what I can gather, the reason why Horde always tries to stage in areas with NPC regions, and why they always try to have people go and roam through their space is not because they're okay with people roaming their space. It's because it allows people to sort of get that experience in PvP and basically makes them better by putting them in a situation where they have to get better.
Yeah, Gobbins is so the Gobbins was in PL when we were attacking Brave. And so he saw all the pitfalls associated with how Brave reacted to getting attacked by someone. And when he and other people decided to make Horde, they like kept those pitfalls in mind to avoid them at all costs because they saw how debilitating it could be to have like a defeatist attitude towards PvP, which is, oh, we're gonna lose anyway. This sucks, blah blah blah. Which is kind of the mentality that plagued Brave toward the end of the PL campaign against them. Like, and a lot of those names are gone now, right? So now you have like people much higher that are all about the fun. They're all about the fights. And then you have someone like Dunk Dingle who is just all about having a good time and being like he like is the epitome of positive mental attitude
He
when it
really
comes
is.
to these type of things. So Brave are in like an incredibly good space culture wise for an attack like this.
I totally agree. This question was probably already answered, but what would you say, I guess, most surprised you about this war? Me personally was how fast we sort of got into Delve. I personally thought like goons were gonna just like, you know, hold the line at Delve and throw as much ISK as they can at us, which technically they did when they threw trillions worth of ships at us, but I honestly thought that they were going to continue to do that because essentially stopping those Keepstars just straight up stopped any hope of advance. And the last thing that a lot of EVE players hate is 12-hour long fights where people are just suiciding ships. Depending on who you ask.
I think the most definitely the most surprising thing to me was just everything about those Keepstar fights. Literally just every single part about it. Not only like that they decided to devote a lot of resources to it. I understand that completely. I understand the idea of devoting resources to keep the enemy out or to do anything like that. But after that first one where it cost you so much to do it, and how PAPI were just like gleefully looking at the situation, right? Like this wasn't a way to spin it or anything like that. PAPI were elated that goons spent 1 trillion ISK to kill this Keepstar. And they're just like, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And they just wanted to keep on doing it. And the goons played into the hand so hard. Like that part was just so shocking to me. And then like toward the end for the last one where it was like, okay, to Goon's credit, it feels like I'm trashing them, but to the Imperium's credit, they figured out a way to get the bill down really low, right? They made it like pretty cheap. And one of the strategies that they utilized is they would warp in carriers or dreads, but a lot of carriers at like 500 kilometers, throw the fighters on and then warp off. So they do a lot of like warp on, warp off tactics, and that was it. That was like their bread and butter. In the first fight, they would just drop like 3 or 4 dreads every like 10 minutes of real time to make sure it would stay paused. And this one, they were just like, oh, we'll throw in a few carriers, they'll warp off, nothing can really tackle them. And then the bubble thing happened, which completely foils that plan. Like you can't warp in and warp out. So if you want to keep it paused, you have to devote just an utter ton of dreads to keep that thing paused. And it's just so costly to do as like dread build cost goes up and up and up.
Yeah.
And then they're just like, we're not even going to do anything. They threw like 20 ravens at it and they were like, oh, these bubbles cause lag. Which was complete bullshit, right? Like the notion that the bubbles caused lag is just something that they sold to their members. And the members like kind of bought it, but they still weren't quite sure about it. That was like a bit of a snafu, I think, on the Imperium side. Because here's the thing, like the bubbles went up, then we bridged in the system and warped into them, right? Like you were part of that fight. I'm sure you remember. Like we warped into those bubbles the same way they would have warped into those bubbles, and I didn't see a single disconnect. So the whole idea that the game is out to get you because of these bubbles is an exploit or something was just such a weird angle to take. They could have just said, "Hey, we got this down super cheap, cheaper than anyone else in the game has ever done it. We saw that this tactic wasn't going to work, and we also lost our staging, like our forward staging Fortizar to have people bounce back and forth from. So we had to call it quits." Like they could have just said that, and then that's fine. But they took like this weird little turn about them, which wasn't very characteristic of the Imperium at all, right? To blame the game.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole like 2 weeks was bizarre to me, but everything else has been like kind of normal.
Yeah. I just want to respond to Fluffy Leopard in chat. Fluffy, the whole thing with it being laggy, that's just because of, well, tie-dye. Like, I know, Elise, you've probably been in fights where the tie-dye is just horrible to where no matter what, it's just disconnects. I personally think that if people did disconnect, it had nothing to do with the bubbles. It was just the fact that it was a tie-dye fight. Because I've been in plenty of tie-dye fights that there weren't carriers, there weren't drones, there weren't smart bombs, but yet I still couldn't jump in. Like, it really just depends on what's happening.
I mean, those fights, if we're being frank, are completely unfun regardless, right? So,
oh yeah,
I don't know. It just feels, it just feels like a grind and of shared misery to see who could last longest in the shared misery. But yeah, I mean, it didn't create like a preponderance of lag that would crash the thing. It just completely ruined their strategy, and it's completely understandable to say, hey, there's 30 minutes for this fight. We can't come up with a new strategy in time, so screw it. We got to let this thing come on.
Yeah, and I think what's super interesting. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this. Thank you, Rain, so much for the raid. Also, hi Dunk, and the other people. Oh yeah. But yeah, totally agree. These long fights are not fun, especially in super tie-dye. I remember during, I think, the FWST fight, I jumped in a carrier, which was definitely a mistake because my fighters just didn't work at all. Like it was bad.
I felt like a superhero because I was in an interceptor, and all these like carrier and super pilots are messaging me like, "Hey, Elise, can you hang out near where my fighters are so we can actually kill the guys that they're going after because they keep warping off?" So I was like a hot commodity in just like a lowly stiletto, and I just burn at things, and people get like really excited about it. But that was good for 4 hours. Then I was like, I'm bored of this. Let's do something else.
Well, it was kind of interesting because during the YZ9 fight, I was jumping, I was ready. Because I had switched to a long range dread because I figure, you know what, if I can at least get my guns to cycle, then that's a win. And I can get on some kill mails. Turns out, I wake up that morning, get my dread ready, I'm hyped up, and then my cat comes in and says, "Hey, I need food." I go and to give my cat food. Oh, great, there's no food. I figure, all right, so I'm going to run to the store, come back, feed it. I figure, you know what, this fight's going to take 12 hours. I'm not going to miss anything. I'll just be a little late. I go to the store, come back. It's 1 minute until the anchor timer finishes. Which which I was a little bit sad about, but also like, thank God that this is finally over. But all in all, I think it was pretty ingenious, but probably the even more, well, not really ingenious, but even more interesting thing is that PAPI essentially found a way to bleed goons just by putting down Keepstars. Because I think in those first couple of weeks of doing that, they lost like 4 trillion ISK worth of stuff, which is a huge loss. But then when you compress it into such short amount of times, like we saw the Imperium and Initiative cut their SRP. Granted, I don't know if that had anything to do with them losing 4 trillion worth of starships, but it might have. I really don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really hard because I think the PAPI side would have loved to see that number continue. Like they would have thrown 20 Keepstars if they could get that up to 10 trillion. But just to keep things a little bit level and to put things in perspective, when this war was starting, the Mittani rang the Horn of Gondor, which basically he just sent out a little email blast, a form blast to anyone who had registered on the Goon forums before, and said, "Hey, this is what's going on. Blah blah blah. If you want to help, come back. If not, we could use some stuff." And Mina, who used to be part of like the financial core, which is like, okay, yeah, I'll log in. Oh, there's like 3 trillion ISK worth of stuff here. You can have it. So it's like, yeah, we bled them for 4 trillion ISK, but one guy gave them just over 3 trillion. So does that really matter too much in the scope of things? The big thing was, right, that the Imperiums didn't have replacement dreads for like the next fights, right? So it seemed to be that was more significant rather than like the actual loss of ISK. And I also think a lot of the individuals who were involved in that, like I think a lot of them ended up making money because of how the SRP was working, right? Because you could just hop in there, you'd get a free ship, you could insure it and die, and then come back and just do it again. So I know a lot of people like enjoyed it on the Imperium side where they could just make money.
Mm-hmm. And definitely. That actually leads to another point. This whole myth that the Imperium is poor. What do you think about that? Because just recently they talked about war bonds, but they didn't. It was kind of like a passing comment. I personally don't think that was really a big sort of sign of, oh, Imperium's thinking about doing war bonds. That means they're poor. I honestly think that was just one of those things where, okay, we might do this, but we're looking at sort of future plans. Because one of the things that a lot of players and alliances do in EVE is they make plans for every contingency. And I think that people focusing on the fact that Imperium talked about war bonds, thus they are poor, really didn't make a whole lot of sense.
So there are some different elements to this that I personally think play a huge role, right? So number one, the Imperium marketed themselves as the richest kids on the block making fat stacks on everything, right? They did that for a reason, right? It was part of a recruitment process. It's how they got so big. It's how they rebuilt. And then once you're in the Imperium, the goal for the Imperium is, hey, like you like the culture around here, so you stay around. So a lot of people came in and made a ton of money. A lot of individuals came in and made a ton of money. And some of those individuals left. Some of them stayed around. But as an institution, Goons didn't make a lot of that money. Just the people in the Imperium made that money. And the amount of money that the Imperium did make, they did what you're supposed to do when you're a rich alliance. You spend that money to buy cool stuff or to fund fun projects. You don't just let it sit in this big Scrooge McDuck coffer for rainy day, because then, you know, members are going to be like, hey, where's this going? Where are my taxes going? What's going on here? So you see them putting down infrastructure. You see them building Titans. You see them, you know, getting people programs where they can get in their first capitals. They're spending all of this money back right into their members, which is absolutely the right play to do. And so when you have a moment that comes around where like this type of fighting happens, yeah, they've got more money than I do, obviously, sitting in the coffers, but they don't have like the 50 quadrillion or whatever that people estimate them to have,
Right.
because they've spent it all. But at the same time, if your members are rich, you don't really need to supplement those incomes either. Like you don't need 100% or 125% SRP. If all of your members have like 20 billion stored in their wallets, they can get in like an Eagle or a Munin or a Serb or something like that, spend that 300 mil, and they can replace that themselves if they want to.
Right, and we see a lot of people that actually like do that. Like I myself, if I need to replace a ship, I'll easily just go and buy it myself and not even bother with SRP.
Yeah, in the same way, I don't do a SRP either. I know it's there, it's good. At some point in my EVE career, I depended on it. The only reason I ever flew a Dictor in my life is because our SRP did like 125% Dictor reimbursement. So I'd make money doing it. I was like, sweet, this is great.
Right, and I think that what was I? I totally lost that point. Um, so I think you're getting at is that while the Imperium itself might not have billions and trillions, the members themselves have that money, and since they really don't have much else to spend it on, like Brisk said it yesterday, there are all these rich Imperium members that have multiple Titans, but yet they still have these fat stacks of cash. What else are they going to spend it on? Well, a lot of them would probably spend it on to help the war effort.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a pretty solid investment too. Like, money makes money in EVE Online and in life. So if you can give a team of financial workers like a trillionist just to play the market with, you're going to make 20% on that pretty reliably. So even if you're looking at it from an investment standpoint, it's a good thing. But yeah, so I guess the net of it is Imperium might not have like a mountain full of gold to hide in that has dragons and stuff guarding it, but they've invested this through the years into their membership and all along, as you should in EVE Online, as is right. That's historically where alliances have failed, rich alliances have failed, is because they've held on to that money and they haven't reinvested it back into their membership. So they did the right thing. So these members, I don't think anyone's hurting financially in there. You could probably cut SRP to 0 and you'd still see the same amount of people in the same ships. But they don't necessarily have to do that, of course.
Right. So one other thing too was this actually has to do with the Keepstar incident. So when T5Z was dropped, we saw that the Imperium didn't really contest. Do you think sort of setting this precedent for not contesting, and do you think if they continuously not contest Keepstars or enemy Keepstars being put down, do you think that puts them in a very dangerous situation? Because essentially now you've got a situation where if they don't contest these Keepstars that PAPI puts down, PAPI could, in theory, put down just as many Keepstars as Goons have in Delve. And then you've got a situation where Goons refuse to fight on PAPI Keepstars, but PAPI can't fight on Goon Keepstars because they keep resetting the clock. And now you get to a situation where essentially Delve is this locked in this sort of eternal combat scenario where if we go here, forces from this Keepstar can jump on us, or we can't go here because there's an enemy Keepstar in system, to where it kind of puts Goons in a situation where they have to leave no matter what, because if they don't go and attack those Keepstars and sort of play right into PAPI's hands, then those Keepstars are just going to stay up, and PAPI has free reign all over Delve.
I think to some extent, after that first one goes down, you have free reign regardless, right? You're just giving yourself an avenue to park your supercat fleet. The jump ranges in Delve it's a pretty small region. It's not like the biggest thing out there. So it's not really worth contesting certain ones. Like I think T5Z, I think they made the judgment call, and it's certainly the right judgment call, or at least I would make the same one. Like, yeah, we could spend $1 trillion to get this down, but there's going to be another one sometime. Like if it's not today, it's going to be in a week. Let's focus on resetting these iHubs. And that's what they've been doing, right? So I don't think there's a concern in the Imperium that there's going to be suddenly 50 Keepstars in Delve that they can't deal with. They'll eventually have to leave. I think they're going to be staying and doing the same exact thing, no matter how many Keepstars are in Delve. If there's 1, if there's 10, if there's, I'm sure they'd love if they were at 0, but that's not going to happen.
Also, so that actually reminded me of another point. What do you think about the Grand Theft Keepstar that just occurred?
I think that was just hilarious, right? And apparently Billy told me I'm getting memed that it was like a personal Keepstar, but I'm pretty sure it was. Like I don't think, like, look at where it was. It wasn't strategically significant. Someone clearly forgot when the time was on anchoring, right? They got it off by day. I know the Imperium kind of messaged that like, oh, maybe the game was broken and it screwed up by day. But no, like that was just like a big maybe. But sure, maybe it happened, but I sincerely doubt it, and so do they. They just screwed up. They got caught with their pants down. Keepstar delivered to to the PAPI forces. I know Pittsburgh was really excited to grab it. Maybe not excited is the right word, but he was definitely having a good time when he scooped it up, and he expected a lot more to happen. Like that's one of those fights where you don't really know what's gonna happen, so they signed in and bridged in this Charon to scoop it up, and then they're like, everyone get online, everyone get your big ships online just in case something happens, and then a Sino goes up, like a goon Sino goes up, and two dreads come in, and you're like, what is this a joke? Like what's going on? And then the Charon just warps off in 99% shield, and the dreads just eat it horribly.
Ooh, yeah, no, it was definitely interesting. Again, congratulations to all those involved in swiping that Keepstar. That was definitely funny. But according to chat, it actually nobody actually screwed up. It was actually Curious George that messed it up and unanchored it. So I think we can give the Imperium a pass.
Lol.
Yeah,
I mean, these things happen, right? The
Yeah.
Suaz fucked it up once with the MC Keepstar. He was doing like unanchor memes for 4 months in Syndicate, and then just forgot to reset it, and it unanchored while they were sitting in it.
Yeah, and Redline, apparently Curious George was actually let out of jail before. Yep. All right, so yeah, Redline just corrected me that Curious George's job after he got out of jail was to make sure the Keepstar doesn't unanchor, and he didn't do too well with it. Which, by the way, I love that Curious George meme. It's easily the best meme to come out of this war so far. Because now I just want to go on a crusade against monkeys and EVE Online. It's a shame SMA is no longer around. Actually,
I think
yeah.
I think they're like kind of back. I think there's like an SMA revival going on. I think they booted out like the toxic dudes who are making this high sex scam corp. Or maybe I'm thinking of Mostly Harmless. I don't know. One of those two. But Mostly Harmless had like ook, which is I think a monkey noise as their like slogan.
Yeah.
One of those groups did it right.
So, what else was I? What else were we going to cover? I guess, is there anything that you wanted to talk about or wanted to say?
I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of excited to see to what people think is going to happen. Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Honestly, I believe that this is going to continue in one of these days. There's going to be a mess up on either side, and that's what's really going to tip the balance. Because just looking at it, again, PAPI won't fight on a Keepstar unless they have a jammer, and Goons won't attack Keepstars just at all. So it seems like it's almost a stalemate at this point, but I think the longer it stays a stalemate with PAPI having such a huge presence in Delve, I think that's actually going to hurt Goons in the long run, because that's essentially their space will forever be under threat as long as PAPI has that Keepstar there. And it's going to make living in Delve so much harder, to where eventually they'll start dropping off members. It's fun now, and there's a lot of content now, but wait until it starts getting in the 5-6 month range is my personal thing. Unless they're able to continuously get big wins and kill PAPI supers, which would definitely... The best way to put it is every time they kill one of our supers, the longer it's going to be until we can drive down their morale. If that made any sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. So I'm always like curious to see how other people think it's gonna go out, because I have no idea. Like, frankly, I do think it's gonna be a bit of a long grind. I don't think either side's gonna give up at all, and I think, like, I don't want to say we're gonna be sitting here in a year and it's gonna be the same exact spot, but I think in 6 months, if you go to just fast forward past where next FanFest would have been, I think they're still going to see like a very similar dynamic hanging around in Delve. But who knows? Like, pretty much anything could happen. As you mentioned, like one of the big fights might go down and completely completely just wipe the sail or wipe the wind out of one of these guys' sails, and they'll just give up. But I don't know. I'm really interested to see how the narratives are gonna develop as the war continues, because it's been for the longest time, as we talked about earlier, the Imperium just trying to break PAPI apart. At what point do they give up with that, or is that going to be like their ride or die? Like, at what point are they going to swap to something new? Because they're really good at that type of warfare against, like, historically they've always been. It's Mittani's like bread and butter, but are they going to be able to keep that up? Like, I just I don't know. It's one of those fun dynamics. I'm not sure how it's going to work.
Well, and definitely something that's been definitely a huge part of this war is definitely the narratives. Recently, with like just looking at Trash Talk Tuesday and the meta show, like the narratives have really started to get sort of into that whole like cringy area, to where you have people, you know, being like, aha, I got you, over the use of a single word, which I mean, I guess it does. I don't think it helps your side when you say, aha, I told you, you're wrong. No, Redline, I'm not calling you cringy. When you have a, oh, hey, I got you, over the fact that someone used a single word instead of another, when that word can easily be interchanged, I feel like that's not really a gotcha moment. And essentially, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And I feel like that's what's been really a driving force behind narratives recently.
Yeah, I think that part of it is just people getting bored and not really sure what they want to do, so they just there hasn't been like a ton of fun action. Like, there hasn't been that huge boson fight, right? You haven't seen one side whelp capitals really hard, apart from like the Revenant and the Levy. Like, those are like weird one-offs. So I think what people start getting a little bit anxious, especially when they're staging right next to each other. Like, these people see each other every day. They're in local talking shit to one another, like at all hours of the day. So,
oh yeah,
I think that's par for the course. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, semantics is a pretty weak thing to fall back on.
yeah, and it's really just been the main driving force behind all these arguments. The one thing I did find interesting, though, was when, so you heard about the Requiem for Eternal Requiem, like where they essentially had their entire lines dissolved, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that I found interesting, and this was about what I was saying, was that my first instinct was to just say, oh, well, they weren't really fighting anyway, they didn't matter. But then when you saw the Imperium side bring up the fact of, well, instead of like going and helping them, a lot of your guys basically said, oh, they didn't matter, we didn't care about them, which is kind of a pretty good point. Like, instead of showing compassion, it feels like a lot of us were, or at least I was quick to sort of dismiss their whole like existence, which again probably doesn't help Pappy's narrative. But I guess I'm curious to see your thoughts on that.
So one of the more interesting things that I've seen happening with the Imperium this time around is, when you're talking about the First World War B, they were like really out of touch with reality. If we're going to be completely objective here, like, they thought it was impossible for them to get invaded. And if that happened, they thought it was impossible for them to lose, just because they had this "we're too big to fall" mentality. And in so doing, they set up this like weird system that kind of made everyone, like, diplomatically, everyone was mad at them, and everyone like low-key hated them. You had the low sec people like laugh at them because of the Viceroy program. You had allies just get left up to dry, and like, that dynamic, the way that war unfolded is the Imperium would lose allies, they would lose members, they would have internal strife. Like, so you had CO2 dropping out, and that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. But even before that, like, you had huge allies just get left in the wind and then get mad and leave. and you had huge names like leave. Like this is the exact opposite, right? So we're fast forwarding to World War B2, and the exact opposite happened, right? You have Israd, longtime goon group, coming back into the fold. You have people like Grath swapping sides and joining goons. And instead of having your alliances disbanded on your side and flipped, you're imparting that onto your enemy. So you have Requiem get disbanded, right? So it's a huge change in how it feels between the two wars, even though ultimately, like if you look at it macroscopically, both of them are like, oh, everyone's fighting the goons in World War B1. Ooh, everyone's fighting the goons in World War B2. They're just like so different because of how that plays out.
No, I mean it's been totally interesting to see that. One of the things I did find interesting though was a lot of like it. A big deal was made about Israd joining goons and Grath joining goons, and again, no hate towards Grath. He's an awesome dude, but in the sort of macro scale, or the macro and micro scale, in the grand strategy of that stuff, it really didn't feel like a lot of that stuff. Yeah, it was a morale boost, but in the long term, really didn't affect the war as it's happened. Like I feel like a lot of the stuff that's happened so far probably would have happened anyway if Israd or Grath hadn't come into goons.
Yeah, but it's absolutely right. Like Grath being in goons doesn't change anything at all, right? And I like Grath. He's a good friend, but him being he's completely irrelevant in goons in terms of what he has single-handedly accomplished for the Imperium. But at the same time, the Imperium gets to say, we're not the big bad guy. We're not the evil empire that they call us out to be. We're not some shitty group who takes advantage of their members and stuff. You can see that because we have all these people who are our enemies for years, are joining our side because of whatever, and then they can spin that how they want. And that's like hugely valuable when you're fighting a war, to be able to say, hey, people keep joining us. Like people are picking up the banners. People that used to hate us are seeing us as like in the right here. So it's I think that part is hugely valuable in terms of the messaging and stuff and keeping people motivated.
Right, and I definitely agree with you on that one. The sheer value that the whole thing of Israd Grath joining from a narrative perspective definitely does help, because, and I think throughout this war you had Asher make this big post about how we're not the bad guys, and when you look at like the things he said, yeah, all of that stuff makes sense. It's just you have a lot of people on PAPI, on PanFam, who just sort of have that, I don't want to call it a murder boner, but it's almost like a murder boner because of the past however many years that they've been under attack, that essentially PanFam and goons have fought. So it's almost like that whole sort of war together is sort of a forever war. Like no matter how good the goons make themselves out to be, PanFam is always going to want to kill goons, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, and that's funny too, because for the longest time, PanFam and goons were allies, right? Or at least had some sort of friendly relationship going on. In BTAC-R even, like there was an agreement in place where like the Imperium or the CFC, I think at the time they were called, couldn't even advance into our space because we had an agreement, and they like held true to that. They could have kept going and dug us a big hole, but nope. We had like a profit sharing agreement in place for renters, and that was like it was called the Bot Lord Accords. So and that thing happened, and before that, like together, PL and goons took down the big bad of Band of Brothers, and always worked together in that thing. But yeah, I mean, in Eve, I don't think there are ever like outside of wormhole space, which I've learned is a completely different beast, where people hold like forever grudges, never forgive certain members and certain people, like even if they've slighted you 8 years ago. But in nullsec, I think it's a little bit more fluid than that. So who knows? I will say one like huge slightly important thing that is on the scale for the future is how CCP is balancing nullsec and balancing the rest of the game. And this is just my suspicion, is that the mechanics are no longer in place for something like the Imperium to exist again, right? So what I mean by that is the Imperium got to its state because, and to an extent, Horde did too, right? A lot of nullsec empires did. This isn't just an Imperium thing, but Imperium did it the best. So we're gonna like put them on the spot for this. People that are joining the game or that are in their game, they look at what they can do in low sec and high sec, and they're like, wow, I can make 50 mil an hour out here busting my ass. They look over to Goons or the Imperium or and any of those member groups, and those guys are just laughing at the MER, talking about delve time units and stuff like that. And they're like, well, should I sit here making 50 million ISK an hour being a humsucker worker bee, or should I go out to this delve, this this great area of untold riches, and should I make my nut there? And so they go there, even though they're not goons, they're not from something awful, they're not from any of the other like Imperium allies. They just show up because they wanted the money, and as a result, they like got sucked into the culture, which is great, absolutely good. Like I completely like that idea, but a lot of them also didn't get sucked into the culture. They're just like, yo, I'm mindlessly mining over here, making my nut before the game gets patched or something like that. And the way that CCP are going lately, especially with resource redistribution, I don't think that's going to be a thing anymore, right? So if you reset the Imperium membership and they go somewhere else, let's just say in a year they lose Delve and rebuild in Syndicate. And then they start making money ham over fist, or hand over fist, ham-fistedly, however you want to call it. And they start making tons of money and they're doing cool stuff. I don't think like John Q. Pubby is going to be sitting in low sec saying, I'm making 200 mil an hour over here. I could join that place over there that's making 210, but I don't care that much. So I'm just going to stay where I am here and maybe make a small corp here and try and be cool. So that's where I think the game is going, and I think it's interesting ramifications for whatever side loses here. Because I think there's a huge portion of members on both sides that aren't really interested in being in a nullsec mega block. They're just doing it because it's the best type of gameplay that the game has to offer right now, or more specifically, when they joined.
Right. I mean, I've been part of nullsec mega blocks, I guess, ever since I started playing. More or less, I've been part of mainly PanFam. But yeah, nullsec mega, like the amount of money that I personally was able to make was like $1 billion ISK a day easily, just AFK rook mining. And I think that if, let's say, Imperium does fall or PAPI at the end of this war, I think it's going to be so much harder to build up that wealth that these alliances had pre-war. So let's say Test and this is how, if a big super cat fight happens, let's say Test and Goons completely have their super numbers cut in by maybe like half. That's going to leave PanFam, it's the entity as a whole, in a much better position because they have their supers. They don't really need to rebuild up their wealth. They still have theirs, whereas Goons and Test, they need to make money and rebuild up their wealth in this new system of sort of, I guess, the famine patches, which would be a whole lot harder compared to whereas PanFam would have just already had them. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think Test is really afraid to sort of get into these sort of super fights, is because they know that the minute they get into one of these big super fights, Goons are going to have sort of the pick of, okay, who's going to lose their super fleet? And they've said countless times that they're going to go in on Test. I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like, it's going to be harder to rebuild those caches. And my whole thing is, I think it's going to be also hard to rebuild that member base too. And that's like hugely important. I think in the next, and this isn't something that happens overnight, right? The people that have already joined these groups, like let's say you or like some other guy joined PanFam because they wanted to make a bunch of money. They joined, they found out that, hey, I really like doing this. This is my favorite part of the game. Granted, I don't know any other parts of the game, but I'm having a good time here. They're probably not going to leave, or if they do, it's going to be in a long time from now. But being able to like reload those members from somewhere else, I think that's getting harder and harder and harder to do. And you could argue if that's good or bad or not. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's the reality here is that CCP are trying to balance the game in the way that the things that made the Imperium super successful are no longer going to work the same way. I think in large part, they look at the Imperium as the list of what we have to, like, how do we build a mechanic that these guys wouldn't break, right? So I think that a lot of the motivation is in there. And you see, like, a lot of these patches that are coming, they're small things, right? So you have filaments that can take you to nullsec and you can do exploration out there or PvP or whatever. Now there's going to be filaments coming in the December patch that'll bring you back to high sec. So you don't even have to live in nullsec to get nullsec stuff. You can go out there in a group of like 1, 5, or 10 and then come back in a group of 1, 5, or 10 when you're done. Like, let's say you get camped, wait 15 minutes, boost, you're back in Empire space. And like resource redistribution, Noxium, that's going to be an issue in like 3 or 4 months as people continue to build. So maybe someone's going to be like, yo, instead of being nullsec Care Bear A, I'm going to be lowsec Care Bear A, and I'm going to do cool shit in lowsec.
Also, it seems like PAPI is jumping in a fleet towards the gate camp. Oh, that's a lot of ships. Yeah, it doesn't actually look like they caught anyone. I don't know if you're watching it. Okay, yeah, it's just a couple. That's okay. Yeah, so big fight looks like about to occur in 1DQ. Looks like they're jumping in Feroxes. So, yeah, small little Ferox fight happening.
That's cool. Like that's like when you say this is a powder keg, like yeah, this area is absolutely powder keg. Anything can hit off at any time, and that's one of the cool parts.
Actually happening. Looks like they just managed to tackle a few frigates. Which there's a cormorant out there, but it's probably gonna warp off. But yeah, no, it's a freaking powder keg, as we just saw. What else? Oh. The ESS changes. I personally like them, and I know this has been a hot topic recently. A lot of people say that, it's not a lot of people, but some people say that, it's making nullsec less worth it, and I totally agree. I think that nullsec now is in a place where it's like, is there really a reason to own nullsec space? Because, like, as a veteran player, I'm at that sort of point in my EVE career where I don't really need nullsec to go and make money. I can just spin up a few alts in high sec and just run burner missions and make 600 millisk an hour. I guess, what are your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm talking about, right? The whole patch system, the whole, like, basically a year's worth of patches is trying to devalue the stuff that nullsec has been making and make it so, it's not the end-all, be-all place to do everything, right? If you want to do anything in the game, like, just go back 2 years. Any activity you wanted to do in the game, nullsec was just better at it, with the exception of like frigate PvP and destroyer PvP, which is lowsec was better. But in terms of everything else, the exploration's better out in nullsec, the mining's better out in nullsec, the anomalies are better out in nullsec. Just like you name it, everything was just better out in nullsec, and now that's no longer the case. So that's going to be a huge thing in terms of like the changes to the agency stuff, or not the agency, to the ESS and the dynamic bounty system. I'm glad that they're tinkering with it. I'm glad that they made the change where you can't cloak at 76 kilometers, because that was really annoying. I had so much fun being like a robber baron for a while. I'll just like yeet filament out, go to find some system, go and steal their stuff, and then run away and laugh and then go back to low sec and drop my stuff off or die in the process. But then I started getting these situations where every single ESS I would go to, someone was sitting cloaked at 76 kilometers with like a Hugin or a Lachesis inside. So I'd come inside, they'd decloak and just instantly like obliterate me. And I was like, this sucks. Like, this is not fun. So I just gave up. Like, I literally just stopped doing it, even though I was having fun for a while, because it was shitty. So I'm glad that they're fixing that. I hope they keep iterating on it, right? I hope this isn't just like a one-off iteration. Because the stuff they did is pretty significant in terms of like how high the dynamic bounty system can go. Like the risk modifier, it can get up really high now. The level point is even higher. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to do this reserve bank thing, because that has the potential to be a game changer. We're talking about back in my day, we had like tech moons and R64 moons that created so much content. The amount of ISK stuck in these reserve banks when they finally release the keys, they're going to be similar to those types of numbers. So all of a sudden, there's going to be like this rush, this gold rush to get these tokens out of these banks and just have like good medium scale fights over them. And then all of a sudden, like that type of play style has a purpose again, right? So the Black Legions of the world, maybe they come back. Maybe that size alliance or that size group, maybe they have a reason to exist again. Maybe the skill yourself type of alliances come back, right? Right now you have like Volta and Rebecca, if you like really want to stretch it, but I think they're a little bit too small. And that's it in terms of like medium-sized unaffiliated groups out there.
Yeah. Well,
so I'm hoping that changes it.
Well, it was actually pretty sad to see like groups like Skill Yourself and the more smaller sort of roving groups that ran around killing stuff, because essentially from what I've talked to and from the people I've talked to, like that's like the ultimate sort of play style, is going in, being part of a group that has no blues and just killing everyone. A lot of the players that I talked to, or one of the players I talked to by the name of I totally forgot his name. Cyber King 11. Like his whole thing was he was sick of being part of the giant power block and just dropping titans on everything. He wanted to do more like small scale, maybe 15 to 10 or 15 to 20 caps on grid at one time from each side, like, but nothing, not like big massive tie-dye fights, which, I mean, we saw a lot of that with smaller groups like Skill Yourself and Volta. I mean, Volta, thank God they've been able to actually really sort of adapt, where now they've got most of their pilots dual boxing their sub-mains. And credit to Volta, they've actually been able to do stuff in nullsec and actually sort of create this sort of little ecosystem up in the north where there are these smaller alliances that can go in, have fun PvP, and make money. So definitely big credit.
Yeah, I do think that's the direction the game is going once again, which is nice to see. But again, it's like it's spooky for these big guys out there, because now they really are going to be under the gun. How are they going to keep their members, right? Because if you can just join Volta and have some fun doing that, or you can join. There's a ton of groups out in the north. Like even Rocapella is doing fun stuff out there. If you can join them, then why are you going to be in a big megacorp? Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a very interesting dynamic. I think it's something that we have to keep an eye on as it develops, because you're talking like the scale of this thing is it's really long times for these things to happen. But I think that's definitely how they're balancing around these big fights. They're just making it so big coalitions maybe don't get to exist, or maybe don't need to exist. I don't know how you want to frame it, but yeah, that's a super interesting thing, change to how the game is being made. And again, you can argue if it's good or bad, and I think that could be a 2-hour show in and of itself, but it's definitely happening one way or another, whether we like it or not. But I'm having a ton of fun just opening up the agency, and I don't know if people are aware of this because it's kind of weird. So if you go to the agency, click on the exploration tab, and then you click and drag to the left, and then you can see the ESS interface. And the ESS interface, it lets you see like banks, like you can look at any system you want to see what the DBS is, or the dynamic bounty like risk modifier is, and you can see what's in the main bank, how long until the next payout, and then how much is in the reserve bank and stuff like that. And you can filter it by region, you can filter it by amount. It's super cool. But so I've just been watching like these people make money and how much money they're making, and it is a lot less than it used to be like 6 months ago. So that's like a huge impact on the game. But I'm also looking at some of these reserve banks. You can filter by like 10 bill or more, and there are some pretty fancy reserve banks out there. And this thing's been in the game for like a month. When are we going to get the keys? If we get the keys in like 2 months, these things are going to be like upwards of 30 bill in these things. So I'm looking at this as like a juicy target. I really want to get my hands on these keys and know more about how this is going to happen.
Do you think it's a good thing that these quote unquote bank robbers sort of have this tool? Personally, I like it. I think it definitely it makes it easier to find content. And one of the reasons why I definitely supported this is, one, and I'm just going to say it, I don't really rat in nullsec anymore. Two, it basically allows these small groups to go out and essentially they're guaranteed to get something. Granted, they might not get a fight, but what we're actually seeing, especially in like people from Brave have talked about this a lot, like they're getting their fights. I think it was one of their Brave FCs that's on Trash Talk Tuesday regularly literally talked about, okay, yes, I was wrong. The content that these things have been providing is definitely fun. Whereas you've also got wormhole guys like Rich Richmond talking about how, yes, they didn't get the payouts, but they got the one thing they're after, which is fights. One of the things that I find interesting, especially the argument against them of, okay, you've got these wormholers, they're going in, they're not making much money from these ESSs. Well, I personally don't think someone who's just printing Iskin a wormhole is going to go after these ESSs because they want to make money. Like, if they want to make money, they're going to use their wormhole. The reason why they're going after them is because, again, they want the fights. You know, they want that sort of adrenaline rush of being one guy versus the world.
I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head there with making. So the ESSs and being able to rob people, it makes PvPing on this scale a bona fide profession, right? You can do this and self-sustain yourself. Before, like, you had to get lucky and like maybe fly a really risk-averse kiting ship and just loot a lot of stuff, or you would have to have like some sort of side hustle to fund your PvP endeavors. I was watching Bjornby stream. Like, Bjornby created the Bank Robbers Corp that's free to join. I love Bjornby. These guys are making serious amounts of money. Like, you're not talking like a billion ISK an hour or anything like that, but they're making enough to cover their losses and then some. And so being a bank robber, it's like a bona fide profession now. You can do this. You can fly like a 500 million ISK battleship if you have to, or if you want to. And you can be like, have it in a sustainable way if you're not a complete idiot about it, which I think is super cool. As long as I've ever played EVE, PvPing has never been a career path. It's been
user joined your channel.
The thing you do, or like the NPCing or whatever PvE you do is the thing you do to fund your PvP adventures. And now you can PvP to fund your PvP adventures. So that's like a really nice change, and I hope to see much more of that.
And one thing too, and this is, so back when I first left my old Corp Concordia, rest in peace, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to go be a pirate. Now in LowSec, you were a pirate because you had negative security status, and you would, maybe ransom off ships and have variable success with this. With this, like, you can actually sort of roleplay as a pirate and go and steal booty, essentially booty in the form of ESS. So from that whole perspective, I think I totally agree with you in that this just opens up more types of gameplay. Like you saw with Bjorn B's Bank Robbers, like, That never existed before. I don't actually know of any other MMO where you can essentially straight up be a professional bank robber. Like, that part I just think is, now that you mention it, 100%. Like, that's a great change.
Yeah, it's hilarious, right? And it also, unlike on the other side of things too, it's not just like you're not just having a thing to give PvPers money and stuff, right? You're also giving them more reason to fight, right? So like these, they're not perfect, right? Nothing in Eve is really perfect, and I think looking for a perfect solution is going to kill you anyways. But you can get decent fights in these things. Yeah, a lot of times you go to frat space, you go to the big ones, they're going to come in and dumpster your face no matter what you have. That's just the virtue of frat being frat, and them being like the size they are and how serious they take like patrolling their space. Credit to them, by the way, for pretty much always doing that. But you could go to like some other space, like maybe you don't get the 200 mil giga payouts, but you can go after like the 80 mil ones. And those guys, maybe there's only like 6 or 7 of them. They'll come at you in kind of random shit. Like maybe there'll be an Ishtar there, and you see if, hey, can my oversized prop Oracle beat an Ishtar? Let's find out. Because until this point in EVE Online, that like never crossed my mind as a matchup that could happen. Just by because no one would ever have a reason to fly those types of ships or that matchup. So it's definitely nifty and it does produce fights, and it does give like small groups an area where they can fight. And I think it's just again, not perfect, but it's cool. It's nice to see, and I'm really enjoying it.
Right. And another thing too, and this has been mentioned quite a bit, and something that I definitely noticed, just like from a game design perspective, is that a game like EVE Online, CCP really doesn't have a way to sort of turn the dials or turn the knobs. Whereas like in other MMOs, they can tweak the economy, they can tweak different weapon stats, and sort of change up sort of the meta. Whereas EVE, they really can't. They don't really have those fine-tuning dials where they can change up, other than, you know, changing ship balance. In a sense, they can't really change the playstyle without doing massive swathing changes. Whereas I think with a system like this, where they can sort of change the payouts a little bit, they have more dials that they can turn and change to make the game better. And one thing that we've seen, again, was like 2 weeks after this came out, they changed the dials a little bit to make it so where it was, you could get more money, or no, it had a higher ceiling for how much money you could get, which makes systems where there's high PvP activity even more profitable.
Yeah, and then they nerfed the other end of it too. Like as you said, they've got a bunch of dials, right? So they made it for the payouts go from 3 hours to 2 hours, right? So you're vulnerable for a shorter period of time if you're a ratter. So they kind of threw a carrot and a stick at you in some regards. But yeah, I don't know. The whole, I think it's a different bag of worms too. The whole idea of like austerity in space and the way they're handling it, I think people are getting a little bit upset about it. And I think like the DBS and the ESS, I think people were less upset about this than everything else in terms of resource redistribution, because everyone's like, okay, this isn't the worst. I'm making money. There's some counterplay here. Okay, this is not so bad.
Well, and I think what was interesting, because after the whole like stuff that they did with mining, like I just knew, okay, it's a matter of time before they're going to do something to ratting. Like with the Rourke nerfs, the resource distribution, like it did not surprise me when they said, all right, now we're going to tackle ratting, or in some cases we're going to nerf ratting. And for empires that just sit all day and just rat in these and have like tons of carriers and stuff just in one system, just printing ISK, I mean, I think this was a pretty good change. I'm glad that it forces you to sort of spread out a little bit more, because I remember when I was in test, you had systems that had nobody in them. Like, you could just go there and rat all day in like a hell, and you'd be the only one there for essentially 3 or 4 jumps.
Yeah, I'm really waiting to see what the carrot's going to be for making nullsec space okay, right? So I know that it feels like we're getting into an overcorrection where everything's getting beaten down.
Yes.
But eventually there's gotta be, right? There's gotta be something around the corner that's gonna sweeten the pot. Because otherwise I think we're gonna be going to some pretty dark times in nullsec. Because why the hell am I out here if I can just do the same thing in low sec or high sec?
Yeah, well, like, I mean, the comparison I made was that I could either sit out and mine in nullsec, or I can spin up an Orca alt and just mine Veldspar all day and make pretty decent money, almost 100% safe. Like, I know people say, yeah, okay, code is a thing, but like suicide ganking in code, if you know how to deal with it, really isn't that big of an issue. And if you've been flying in nullsec for a month or two, code no longer becomes an issue. Ganking in high sec no longer becomes something that you have to fear. Which is my whole thought on it. I am though definitely interested to see how exactly they are going to essentially make, I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, essentially how they're going to make nullsec great again, because right now I don't see any reason to live in it.
Yeah, so I mean the reason, and it's really hard to guess what CCP think about it. And at this point, you know, people have played Eve for a long enough time. The base that you have to have is cautious optimism, right? So if you're doom and gloom, you're gonna burn out and hate the game. If you're like, oh, CCP are gonna fix everything, if you're like overly optimistic, you're going to be met with a brick wall of like sadness and despair. So you have to have like a sense of cautious optimism about how it's going to happen, which I think is like the default healthy state for the community, is if they're cautiously optimistic that you're not going to completely screw up the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, right now the idea is you go to nullsec because you want to plant a flag. That's just not going to be enough, right? There's got to be other reasons to want to be too.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what that's going to be. I'm also curious to see about the stuff that's coming in December, right? So there's a winter event where there's going to be like a exploration theme to it. And we're getting all this from Hobo Leaks. There's going to be an exploration theme to it, killing Sanchez theme to it. There's going to be the final set of pirate implants that sponsors are going to drop, where it's going to be a cap recharge set. So just imagine plus 33% cap recharge to everything. Jesus, that's going to be insane. And also there's going to be like ice belts in high sec through like weird different storms. So they're going to like take the gates, and just it's going to be absolutely wild. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but we're getting more storms in the game. I don't know if they're going to be permanent or temporary. And I talked about earlier, there are now filaments that can take you to these different storm environments. And I think CCP looked at how people were treating Pochvin, and they're like, oh shit, this is something we didn't expect, because people would just essentially filament out into 0-0, and then filament back in the Pochvin, and then scan the exit sig and end up in high sec. So CCP were just like, yo, instead of, why don't we just like cut out that middleman there? Yeah. Keep Pochvin, and we'll just let people teleport back to high sec, and we'll put a cap on it. We'll put it at a cap of 10.
Yeah, they're essentially using Pochvin as like an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, right. But so if you go out with a group of 25 dudes with the big filament, you can't come back to high sec, right? So the cap on that is the 10-man filaments. But it's huge. It's cutting out the middleman. It's a huge thing. And we'll see if that becomes a permanent fixture, like filaments were when they came, or, you know, CCP this year has been all about like, they have this like weird fuck it YOLO attitude. We're just like, hey, let's just try it and see what happens. And maybe greatness will come from it. Who knows? Maybe it won't, and we'll move on. But I kind of like that attitude, even though it's sometimes a little bit too cavalier. And I'm always scared when they do something big and they're just like, hey, what's the worst that could happen? And I'm sitting here like, yeah, everyone could leave. That's the actual worst that could happen. Like there's such a small critical mass of that you need to do anything in Eve, and if you go below that, then the game just sucks. So yeah, that that's the worst. But so far, none of it's been like game destroying or anything like that. So it's been curious to see.
Well, and then you've got all the people who are like all doom and gloom about how, okay, the game's dead, Eve's dying. Well, you've had people saying Eve's dying, I guess, for the past, what feels like since I've been playing. Granted, there have been some patches, like, what was it, the Blackout, that really did have an impact on, subscription numbers. I know when Blackout hit, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to make a big herf blurf about it on Reddit. I'm just going to stop playing the game. Which I thought was kind of interesting, where you've got all these players that say all this stuff about how they're going to quit the game, and how CCP sort of made a joke about it. But in a way, I think that's kind of bad, because you still have players that don't say anything and will just quit. And I think making fun of players in that way by saying, okay, well, these guys said they're going to quit, but they didn't actually quit, I don't think that's healthy for anyone. And I'm glad that CCP really hasn't done that in a while.
Yeah, I think it's really spooky when you hear like stories like you through Blackout, where people just, they don't say anything, they just don't log in again. And that's like absolutely terrifying for me as a fan of EVE Online, right? Because I know that's the person that types on our Eve, like, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. It's like the vocal minority that's doing the complaining, and the same people that type on the forums. I always fly around space on like an alt or something, and I like just start a random combo with dudes in local, and their view of the game is so different than my view of the game and other people's view of the game. It's so weird that you could have this one game and everyone, or like there are these huge groups that play it in a completely different way, and they're kind of like almost unaware of each other, right? So I ran into some guys that like live in LowSec, and they're all about these changes. I think it's great. And then you talk to people in nullsec, and they're like, these changes are the worst. It's the cancer killing the game, blah, blah, blah. These two groups are like completely unaware that one another exists. They're just happily going around like playing EVE Online.
So true. Because, all right, so me and my roommate, he's in LowSec. He's actually in Templars Calciff, which I had to give him a big like congratulations when they won the Alliance tournament. But he, like, his whole thing is like, yeah, we just run around doing stuff, and like the whole nullsec wars and all that stuff, like, they just like, they're outside his scope. Like, he could care less of like what's happening, or the fact that goons are goons. All right, let me rephrase that. Imperium, Legacy, and PanFam are all killing each other. The fact that that's happening, he doesn't care. You have streamers that run missions all day. They could care less. It's just outside of their scope of reality. And it's so weird. Like, there's a YouTuber by the name of DeLone Wolf, which, by the way, if everyone should go and look him up. He's a great YouTuber. Who, his whole world is just in that one system, doing his industry, going out exploring, and it's just such a different play style. Like, he's essentially said, I'm gonna take this game alone, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna go do my own thing. Whereas you have someone like me and someone like you who are out there participating really in this sort of what feels like its own part of the community. With World of Warcraft, you've got the World of Warcraft community, whereas in EVE, you've got the low-sec community, the null-sec community, the high-sec community, and wormholes.
Yeah, and everyone in there does like their own thing as well. It's really eye-opening too when you really get to see the completely different play styles and how people view it, and getting their just seeing how they interact with EVE and how it's so different. Because when you're first starting out, and even when you're like 3 or 4 years in, whatever you do in that game, or whatever you do in the game and you specialize in, you become convinced that that's like the best way to play the game. And not only the best way to play the game, but like the right way to play the game. and then everyone else that does something different, they're just these crazy hill people doing some backward shit. And then you ask those crazy hill people like how they view the game, and they're just like, yeah, this is the only way to play. I don't know why anyone else would play any other way. This is what I do. It's just so wild to see.
Yeah, like take the streamer community. So one of the biggest, well, actually, completely ignore that point. One of the biggest things about Eve for me is, being in a community in Eve and being part of these big nullsec blocks is because it's more of a community. Whereas you've got the streamer community who they're just sort of going out doing their own thing, and they're kind of just a loose collection of friends that come in, that get online and they fight and they do all that stuff. And then you've got the guys who just do their own thing and build in high sec and just talk to a bunch of random people. Like, it's so different in one game, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it really is. And so when you see like these changes come in, like you can just see people that are just like, oh, this is the worst, and someone's like, oh, this is okay, and then someone's like, doesn't affect me at all. Like, it's just so fun to watch these be tinker with all these dials and just see how different people react. I will say, like, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, most people in nullsec are like, these changes are pretty shit, guys. Like, they're just constantly beating me down. When is the nerfing going to end? And like, who knows? Like, I'm just curious to see how they do it. I think cautious optimism has to be the only way to look forward, because I really just don't know.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because you see all these different communities and how they each quote unquote make their, well, not quote unquote, but how they each make their ISK and EVE online. Like, whereas you've got nullsecers who think that, they're hot shit and they're making all this money, but then you've got someone like Hateless Gaming who's making 600 mil an hour multi-boxing like anyone in nullsec would, except he's doing it better and in high sec and in relative safety.
Yeah, that guy's absolutely nuts. Like, I chatted with him a little bit, and the stuff that he can do, he put out like a new video. You can now use a Damovic, I think it is, to run all of the frigate burner missions. You just have to change the fittings a little bit, but you get to keep the rigs. He just sits there and figures this out. Oh yeah. And or no, maybe it's a Nurgle. Yeah, it's a Nurgle. And he goes in and just figures this out, and he makes just giga bank. And then you have someone like Looking for the Nub, who's a streamer. He like triple boxes Nurgles in the Abyss and makes like 800 hours. And you have the Corrupted, who'll go out and doing the new T6s in the Abyss and make almost $1 billion ISK an hour. Oh yeah, like, these crazy guys, they're just absolutely insane. And one of the big things, the big takeaways I've had from this austerity patch or the famine patch, resource redistribution, it's not necessarily that CCP is nerfing all the play styles and nerfing ways to make money. They're closing doors and opening windows and then just taking out complete walls too, right? So what's really getting nerfed is like these large groups and older players and veterans players, their institutional knowledge of how to make money in EVE, which has been a static for as long as EVE's been around, right? All of that is going away because now, like, ratting isn't the best way to make money, right? The mining isn't a reliable way to make good bucks anymore. Like, the trade routes are completely different and things like this. So just all of that knowledge that people had is now becoming a little bit more worthless. And so everyone gets set on this new, like, even playing field of trying to figure out the best ways to make gigabucks and kind of break the game at the same time. So it's neat to see that, yeah, you can't wipe the game and start everyone from zero, but you can sort of wipe the game in terms of what's the effective way to make ISK in the game or do certain activities in the game. And it's so interesting to see this play out over the past, like, especially the last 6 months is when I've really been noticing it, because it seems like you talk to someone and they don't want to tell you what they do to make ISK. Before it was like, oh yeah, I rat, or yeah, I mine, I run some Merkles. And they're cavalier about it. Now it's like, hey, I don't I don't want you to ruin this for me, so I'm not going to tell you what it is. This is my thing.
Everyone's got
this
their
is
own little
my
secret
precious
thing.
side hustle.
Well, and what's even been interesting too is the Abyss, which I honestly hope that they keep the Abyss as one of the better ways to make money, because when you look at it from a design perspective, the risk for going and running these abyssal sites for some people is upwards of billions. Like, you've got people running these multi-billion-isk, cruisers that are the same price as like a super carrier, and they're making more than a super carrier could ever wish to make. But at the same time, is if they lose it by simply doing one thing wrong, they could be out 20 bill and there's nothing there to help them. Like, I've personally lost like 15 billion ISK worth of stuff just in cruisers in the Abyss, and it's just been like, oh crap. So the risk is definitely there and the reward is definitely there. And plus, I mean, the Abyss is in my opinion, some of the most engaging PvE content EVE has currently.
Yeah, it is really good for people that haven't tried it or think it's just a flash in the pan. It's actually fun, like the idea of an instance PvE arena, or instance PvE, like makes a lot of EVE players like roll their eyes or like, oh, this is dumb. But just think of it like a mission that's way better, or a sanctum that's way better, because the NPCs act in a dynamic way. You're like, yeah, you can kind of figure out the general things for it, but there's never like, you can't just go to Hateless Gaming's guide to how to blitz this certain mission and be like, oh, I have to kill this one NPC. Okay, her. Like, it's everything is completely different. And I really think in 5 years, missions are going to be gone from EVE, and that's going to be amazing. And I think everything's going to be replaced by these like dynamic things, because like in terms of like the tech and stuff, it's there. Like, it's on the server now. It's just they're in this corner in this weird abyss area right now. But you could just as easily make NPCs act like this everywhere. It's challenging, yeah, but I think it's also rewarding at the same time. I will say, if you are going to take a very expensive ship into the abyss, be very careful, because one of the most imbalanced parts of the risk reward spectrum when it comes to the abyss is you can probe someone's abyssal signature and sit there with like 3 tornadoes. And if you're in like an active tank ship that doesn't have a lot of EHP, you get blapped, and it costs the guys doing it like 100 mil, and you lose your like 5 billisk ship. And oh, and by the way, if they bring a Thrasher, your 3 billisk pod is gone too. So just kind of be aware of that as a possibility before you dump 20 bill into a ship or 10 bill into a ship. Because I know that definitely does happen. I think there's 2 or 3 groups that do it. I don't think it's been happening lately, but it definitely is always a possibility.
I lost a crystal pod because someone with a Thrasher was popping pods. And yeah, it was not fun. It was definitely... It made things more difficult, and when I then was like, okay, well, I'm going to throw this ship back into the abyss, it then died. So instead of being out 2 bill, I was out 9. So yeah, no, definitely.
I see LB saying that I stream sniped him once coming out of the abyss. It wasn't me. I know who it was though. He was in my corp. His name is Hliner. He's an Icelandic kid.
Apparently, I'm.
But I did see it happen. He was very happy. He captured your reaction and sent it to me. I was like, dude, you can't be doing this, man. Too harsh. But yeah, he made a mint doing that for, I think when the drop rate got set to like 80% or 95% or whatever, he just went out and was like, I'm just gonna gank people running the abyss. I don't care. It cost me almost nothing to do it. I get all of my loot right back, and I get all of their swag back too.
So I don't know if Elise, you're watching the stream, but apparently there is a new product that you can get on the new Eden Post website. That's essentially the Make Nullsec Great Again Trump hat, which is
very nice. Oh man, so I've got like a funny story about that. So Damascus Kadesh, who's like, he's also a streamer and a content creator, an all around cool guy. He actually is super cool for non-Eve related things. He makes tiny homes for people and has a YouTube channel about it for the whole subculture. And he's like a rock star in that area. Anyway, it's super cool. He went to FanFest like 3 or 4 years ago, and he loves Amar ships. He flies like almost exclusively Amar stuff. And he made some Make Amar Great Again hats. And he handed them out, and other people had them. And there were some like Make Amamaki Great Again hats as well going around. And then like towards the end of the pub crawl, everyone was like wearing these through Reykjavik, through downtown Reykjavik. And like, as some of the locals got a little bit more drunk, they could just see Make blah Great Again. Like they couldn't figure out what it was because it was like not a word that makes sense there. Like a normal person would read Amar and Amamaki and be like, whatever, there's an A there. It's probably Make America Great Again. And they went off on this like huge tirade and lectures about how like just political arguments about Trump. And this guy, like, he just forgot that he was wearing this hat. He was like, why is this guy yelling at me about Trump? I don't get it. So yeah, that's just random fun things that happen at FanFest. Hopefully we'll have that again in 2022 in the after times.
I'm hoping. Well, I know my corp apparently does a big thing at E Vegas, so I'm definitely gonna wear this hat that Redline made to Vegas this year or next year, hopefully, if COVID is ever taken care of. Also, I quickly want to shout out the people who followed. Door is Friday night. Thank you for the follow. Psycho Driver, Good 31, Jesse Riddle, and Habit Gaming. Thank you guys for the follow. So, I think that pretty much covers everything. Elise, was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I mean, you asked me that like an hour ago, and I was like, no, I'm good. And then I just went off on some tangent, but it was fun. I'm glad. I think we did cover quite a lot, and it's relevant. It's very interesting to me. I'm like super curious about how this is all going down. So thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me to Between Two Keepstars. Like the show. I'm glad to see you guys have a new home on the New Eden Post.
All right. Well, everyone, this has been Between Two Keepstars. Shout out to Redline for being the channel mod because I was doing stuff. But yeah, remember guys to always bubble wrap your Keepstars. And see you guys in 2 weeks. Where's that button?